Already done, Jesse. Already on the shelf. Thank you, sir. Congressional Republicans hurry to get a temporary budget deal done before money runs out Friday. The United Nations defies the United States and condemns the recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And is the government about to take another look at two of Hillary Clinton's scandals? This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Bret Baier. Congressional Republicans are basking in the glow of a political touchdown in the form of tax reform legislation, but now they're trying to kick the extra point by ramming through a temporary funding bill to avoid a potentially momentum-busting government shutdown. Correspondent Peter Ducey tells us where we are right now from Capitol Hill. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Brett. We've been watching as lawmakers file down the steps of the House, where that short-term budget just sailed on through with the help of 13 Democratic members who voted yes. 16 Republicans broke with the party and voted no. So now it's up to the Senate to stop a shutdown.
The American people are counting on Congress.
If the Senate okays the short-term budget just approved by the House by 11:59 tomorrow night, almost every federal program stays funded at current spending levels till January 19th, with the exception of a handful of Pentagon programs that get small budget increases. That's even though some Republicans wish the military got a beefier boost.
Anytime you're talking about deficits and just extending doing a continuing resolution, it's hard because, one, it hurts our defense. And so I think the area that's bothering us the most is our military is going to get their 33rd CR in a decade after sequester cuts, and our military's readiness is hurting.
The continuing resolution also puts automatic Medicare cuts on the shelf until 2019 and funds the Children's Health Insurance Program through March. Both those provisions enjoy broad bipartisan support, but Democrats, upset they didn't have much of a say in the debate, are forcing Republicans to go it alone.
If you've got the votes, you don't have to talk to us. But if you don't have the votes, we really need to come together in a bipartisan way to be the responsible stewards of this government.
A sore spot for one senator in this budget, the reauthorization of an NSA spying tool, FISA Section 702.
The short-term extension is okay. I will absolutely filibuster any long-term extension. They try to do it for a year, they try to do it for 4 years, or they try to do it forever, which some of them want. There needs to be more oversight.
Not in the short-term budget, a DACA fix. So, despite the demands of Democratic lawmakers, there's no new resolution for people brought to this country illegally as children.
I don't think in his heart that the president intended to hurt these people in the very cruel way that they are being hurt by the actions that are being taken.
Uncharacteristically quiet about his DACA strategy today, Senator Chuck Schumer, who seems content using DACA as leverage over Republicans next time there's a shutdown fight in January, days before the State of the Union.
We're not talking about that issue until we see what the House does.
One retiring Republican, Congressman Charlie Dent, says he's seen things in his 7 terms that give him confidence a shutdown can be avoided.
There'll be drama, there'll be chaos, there'll be yelling and screaming, and then we'll avert a shutdown. But that's what happens. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be this way.
There may be trouble brewing in the Senate tonight for $81 billion worth of government assistance for the victims of hurricanes and wildfires. It needed Democratic support to pass in the House, and conservatives are very wary of this package because the $81 billion in new spending is not offset by any cuts elsewhere. Brett?
And Peter, because everybody wants to get out of town, the Senate could speed this thing up. It could happen during this hour, right?
It could happen within the next hour or so, but no such thing as a sure thing, Brett.
That's right. All right, Peter Ducey live on the Hill. Peter, thank you. Stocks back in the positive territory today. The Dow gained 56. The S&P 500 was up 5. The Nasdaq finished ahead 4. The White House was subdued one day after the big tax cut victory, but the president is expected to metaphorically spike the ball with a signing ceremony sometime soon. For now, the president is content to spread some holiday cheer among America's finest. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has that story tonight from the North Lawn. Beam, John.
Brett, good evening to you. And I spoke with White House officials just a few minutes ago who told me they don't see any problem with getting that continuing resolution through the Senate and here on the president's desk tomorrow. It certainly looks like this is going to shape up to be a very Merry Christmas this year for President Trump, with the expected signing also tomorrow of the biggest achievement of his presidency. The lift from a huge legislative victory still under his wings, President Trump left the White House today to wish Merry Christmas to some of the heroes who keep this country safe.
I'm heading over right now to Walter Reed Military Medical Center to say hello to some of the bravest people anywhere in the world.
It's a tradition for U.S. presidents to visit Walter Reed and thank the wounded men and women for their service. President Trump enjoys wide support from the military, pledging to rebuild and re-equip U.S. forces. But the president's promises ride on Republicans and Democrats in Congress reaching a long-term spending agreement next year. Today, the White House was urging Congress to just keep the government running for the next 4 weeks with a continuing resolution.
We want a clean bill, and that's what we hope happens, and we hope it happens soon, because we know all of you guys and all of Congress and everybody else is ready to make sure that the government is fully funded and functional and go home and celebrate Christmas.
The president is anxious to get a continuing resolution on his desk because he wants to sign tax reform tomorrow before he leaves for his Christmas vacation at Mar-a-Lago. But in order to sign the bill tomorrow, the president needed waivers contained in the CR to prevent cuts to entitlement programs.
It's always a lot of fun when you win.
Still, there is plenty for the president to celebrate, including word from more companies of tax reform-related bonuses. Boeing, AT&T, Wells Fargo, Comcast, and Fifth Third Bancorp all announcing either bonuses for employees or wage increases, even more charitable giving. President Trump believes this is just the beginning.
We're bringing the entrepreneur back into this country. We're getting rid of all the knots and all the ties, and we're going to you're going to see what happens. And ultimately, what does it mean? It means jobs, 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 jobs.
And there was good news for the president on the economic front. The Bureau of Economic Analysis revised third quarter GDP down 0.1 of a point to 3.2%, but combined with second quarter growth of 3.1%, the U.S. economy had its best back-to-back performances in 3 years. But the president may face new opposition in his quest to replace Obamacare next year. Numbers released today show enrollment in Obamacare surpassed expectations. 8.8 million people signed up for health insurance on the federal exchanges during open enrollment. That's 400,000 fewer than last year, though still surprisingly strong, given the administration's efforts to undermine the program.
They tried for months to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which would have sent costs soaring for millions of Americans and caused millions more to lose coverage. They failed in that effort. But they have consistently undermined ACA in every way they can think of.
After the tax reform vote yesterday, President Trump claimed to have repealed Obamacare by eliminating the tax penalty in the individual mandate. But repealing the individual mandate does not fully repeal Obamacare, though it could be said that it may hasten its demise through a combination of reduced revenues and higher insurance premiums. Brett?
John Roberts, live on the North Lawn. John, thanks. Vice President Mike Pence has just left Afghanistan. He spent several hours there today in an unannounced visit. It's the first to the country by either the president or his VP. Pence landed at Bagram Air Base under heavy security. He met American commanders and troops. He also went to Kabul to visit Afghanistan's president. United Nations Ambassador Nikki Haley made it perfectly clear today countries voting for a UN resolution condemning the U.S. recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital will pay a price. Now we'll see what that price is. The declaration passed by a vote of 128 to 9 with 35 abstentions. Senior correspondent Rick Leventhal is at the UN tonight.
When we make generous contributions to the UN, we also have a legitimate expectation that our goodwill is recognized and respected.
U.S. Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley making it clear to member states of the world body that America has the right to move its embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, warning that siding against the decision by President Trump could have deep financial consequences.
America will put our embassy in Jerusalem. That is what the American people want us to do, and it is the right thing to do. No vote in the United Nations will make any difference on that.
The UN called this emergency session to debate a resolution rejecting the U.S. decision recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Proposed by Turkey and Yemen, the resolution drew the support of nearly every single Arab and Muslim country and many more around the globe.
We believe the decision by the U.S. government to relocate the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem is regrettable and is not constructive in advancing a sustainable solution.
We will not be intimidated. You can be strong, but this doesn't make you right.
The state of Palestine respects the sovereignty of states so long as this sovereignty is in line with international law. However, we refuse to have sovereignty used as an excuse to violate international law.
The vote was overwhelming, 128 in favor, just 9 opposed, and 35 abstaining, a stark reminder that Israel has a short list of friends.
Those who support today's resolution are like puppets. You are puppets pulled by the strings of your Palestinian puppet masters. You are like marionettes forced to dance while the Palestinian leadership looks on with glee.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called today's resolution preposterous and said Jerusalem is Israel's capital, always was, always will be. And the White House says the embassy in Israel will still move. The only question is if and how the president will follow through on his threat to punish the nations that didn't support him here today. Brett?
Rick Leventhal, live outside the UN. Rick, thanks. So what do you think? Should the U.S., what should they do? The U.S. do about the UN vote? Let me know on Twitter at Bret Baier. You can use the hashtag Special Report, or on Facebook at facebook.com/Bret Baier SR. Another North Korean soldier made a sprint to freedom today. This defection to the south was far less dramatic than the one we showed you last month, but it nonetheless involved a desperate man, a heavily guarded border, and gunfire. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott has details.
Another defection along the tense DMZ. This time, a 19-year-old North Korean soldier crossed the border into the south early Thursday morning. Warning shots were fired by the South Koreans when soldiers from the north approached.
Our military safely guided the defected soldier and plans to investigate further the defection process and motivation.
This comes after last month's defection of a North Korean in Panmunjom at the DMZ. North Korean troops fired at and injured that soldier. Defections have tripled this year over last, including 4 soldiers.
There have never been this many defections in any year from North Korea in recent memory. 4 may indicate that there is a real desperation in the North Korean army.
Meanwhile, U.S. and South Korean troops recently held military exercises practicing ways to infiltrate into North Korea and seize weapons of mass destruction. Indications the regime of Kim Jong-un might be the target of more aggressive military planning by the U.S.
I see some signs that the White House is considering certain forms of limited military attacks against North Korea in the event of further provocations.
And with Winter Olympics less than 2 months away, there was more training. U.S. and South Korean Marines in winter military drills in the Olympic town of Pyeongchang, learning to defend against commando-style attacks from the north.
We've covered reconnaissance skills as well as critical combat skills in a cold weather mountainous environment.
More likely, experts say, Pyongyang will distract world attention with another missile launch or nuclear test, a reason for new calls from the South Korean government for a pause in provocative joint drills with the U.S. during the Games. The South Koreans are, in fact, optimistically labeling their upcoming Olympics the Peace Games. They and many others, no doubt, would be happy at least with a pause in regional hostilities for the event. Brett.
Greg Palcott in London. Greg, thanks. Back here in the U.S., congressional Republicans are again tonight going after the FBI and the Justice Department over perceived prejudice against the Trump administration. It's just part of the backlash against the president's opponents, both past and present. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry has today's developments.
Not looking good.
Not looking good.
A year dominated in part by President Trump being in the crosshairs of a special counsel investigation is ending with Attorney General Jeff Sessions ordering that Justice Department prosecutors press FBI agents about why they did not seek charges in the Uranium One deal involving Hillary Clinton.
I think the end game would be, number one, if they actually found something, they certainly would be potentially capable of reopening the investigation and handling it as though it were an active, ongoing criminal matter.
That could mean a second special counsel beyond Robert Mueller being named to probe the way investigations of Clinton's email server, as well as the Uranium One deal that involves contributions to the Clinton Foundation, were handled by then FBI Director James Comey, his deputy Andrew McCabe, and a top agent, Peter Strzok, who sent those text messages supporting Hillary Clinton, who recently dismissed questions about Uranium One.
I would say it's the same baloney they've been peddling for years.
Yet today, the Senate Intelligence Committee heard closed-door testimony from Bruce Ohr, recently demoted at the Justice Department for not disclosing his connections to the Trump dossier.
He has a meeting during the election with Christopher Steele, the same guy that the Democrats through Fusion GPS paid to do this discredited Trump dossier. And then, oh, by the way, Bruce Ohr's wife works for Fusion GPS, and Ohr meets with Fusion after the election. So how do you explain that conduct?
McCabe was pressed on the dossier today, meanwhile, in a long private session with the House Judiciary Committee, after facing 7 hours of questioning by the House Intelligence Committee on Tuesday, where he could not recall when he learned the Clinton campaign and the DNC paid for the dossier, leading Senator Rand Paul to tweet today, "Time to investigate high-ranking Obama government officials who might have colluded to prevent the election of @real Donald Trump. This could be worse than Watergate." Democrats insisted this is a diversion from the real issue,
which was the Russian attempt to subvert the last election, the possible collusion, well, the certain collusion by many members of the Trump campaign.
And other Democrats tonight are claiming this is an attempt to undermine Mueller's investigation, potentially fire him over the holidays, a charge the president and his legal team have consistently denied. Brett?
Ed, thank you. It was a big day for the nuclear power industry, the fate of the country's 2 new reactors at stake. We'll tell you why and what happened after the break. Election officials in Virginia are expected to pick a name from a bowl to decide the winner in a deadlocked election that will determine the political power structure of the state house. You heard that right. Draw a name from a bowl. If the Republican incumbent wins, the GOP maintains control of the House. If the Democrat wins, the 2 parties will each hold 50 seats. Democrats are not happy. They say they're exploring legal options. Another voting story for you. Alabama's Secretary of State says there was nothing improper in last week's Senate election, despite a curious comment by a man in a TV interview. A supporter of the winner, Democrat Doug Jones, said he and others had come from different parts of the country to vote and canvass together. An investigation revealed the man has lived in Alabama for more than a year and is registered to vote in the state. The fate of the nation's first new nuclear reactors since the 70s is a little bit clearer tonight. A decision was made today in Atlanta affecting a controversial and hugely expensive power plant. Correspondent Doug McElway shows us what happened.
In 1955, the nuclear submarine USS Nautilus heralded the dawn of a new peaceful energy.
The first of the Navy's daring doers on the Nautilus.
Its propulsion system was the prototype for civilian nuclear plants. But no new civilian plant has been constructed in the U.S. since 1978. Aging infrastructure, opposition from environmentalists, and bureaucratic obstacles have dulled a once bright promise. Today, that may have changed.
Signified by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous.
The Georgia Public Service Commission unanimously approved permitting of the Vogtle 3 and 4 reactors in Burke County, Georgia. The owner, Georgia Power, announced moments later it will complete the plant, but under the deal it must rebate $75 to each of its 2.5 million customers because of cost overruns and delays.
We will do all that we can to complete this project.
Nor was this an easy decision for the state regulator.
For the last decade, we've seen budget overruns, schedule being busted. and it is an inherently risky project.
The risk stems in part from the just-passed tax bill, which did not include an extension of nuclear power tax credits that would have made construction more economically feasible. Regulators announced the go-ahead anyway based on a promise from Republican congressional leaders.
They assured me that that would be an item that Congress would take up early in January.
Environmentalists and others opposed to the plant fear customers will bear the brunt of future cost overruns.
The problem here, though, is that Georgia Power says if the extensions don't come through, they want customers to make up for that as well, and we think that's unreasonable.
Others contend it is pressure from environmentalists that has helped increase the cost of this non-carbon emitting energy. One example is Germany. Spurred in part by Chernobyl, then Fukushima, Chancellor Angela Merkel undertook an energy transformation, promising to end all nuclear power by 2022. As German plants were taken offline, energy costs skyrocketed. Two other nuclear stations in Watts Bar, Tennessee offer another lesson in time-consuming bureaucracy and permitting. Construction got underway there in 1973, but the first unit was not complete until 23 years later. The second unit was finished just 2 years ago. Brett?
Doug, thanks. This is a Fox News alert. You're looking live at the Senate floor. The Senate right now is debating a stopgap funding bill that would keep the government funded past tomorrow night. As we reported earlier in the show, the House has already passed this bill. We are told to expect a Senate vote around the top of the hour, and we will see two votes. We care about the second in the series of votes here. We'll bring that to you live here on Special Report. As lawmakers head for the doors for Christmas break, this would fund the government through January 19th. All remaining significant evacuation orders for areas around the big Southern California wildfire have been lifted. A new round of heavy winds did not cause a surge in activity there. The Thomas fire has destroyed at least 750 homes and burned about 425 square miles. It's 60% controlled tonight, we are told. Up next, the U.S. will sell weapons to Ukraine, and that could set up a showdown with Russia. We'll explain. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 13 in Memphis as crews removed two Confederate statues from Memphis parks after the city sold the parks to a private entity. The statues of General Nathan Bedford Forrest and Confederate President Jefferson Davis were taken down immediately. Fox 35 in Orlando as SpaceX unveils its new Falcon Heavy rocket. The company says it will have double the thrust of the next biggest rocket currently in use. But SpaceX owner Elon Musk has said there's a good chance the unmanned rocket will blow up when it is launched in the next few weeks. Not exactly a confidence boost from the owner. And this is a live look at New York from our affiliate, Fox 5. One of the big stories there tonight, a man who has been in prison since he was 17 is free tonight. 46-year-old Mark Denny was cleared of participating in a rape and robbery at a fast food restaurant in 1987. The DA now says the victim misidentified Denny as her attacker. Denny says he holds no ill will toward her. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. The U.S. plans to allow the sale of lethal weapons to Ukraine for use against pro-Russian separatists. Supporters say it's long overdue. Critics say it brings us closer to a real conflict with the Russians. Lucas Tomlinson has more tonight from the Pentagon.
The Trump administration ending the arms embargo on Ukraine, allowing them to buy 50 caliber sniper rifles and other light arms from U.S. companies. But the U.S. government will not be supplying the weapons. Still, the decision was applauded on Capitol Hill.
This president, at this time, with his national security team, is finally doing what people on both sides of the aisle have tried to get administrations to do. I mean, these weapons are to defend Ukraine against Russia's aggression.
Russia hawk Senator Tom Cotton turned it up a notch, quote, "This is a break from failed Obama-era policies to make Russia pay a cost for its aggression." With this decision, the Trump administration is reminding Vladimir Putin and his cronies that they lost the Cold War and we won't tolerate their bullying of our friend Ukraine. But the State Department pushed back, saying weapons have been available for purchase before, after Russia annexed Crimea in 2014 and supported Kremlin-backed fighters in eastern Ukraine. Quote, "Under the previous two administrations, the U.S. government has approved export licenses to Ukraine, so this is nothing new." But a Green Beret and former Bush White House official says otherwise.
This is a significant break from the Obama administration. It is the largest sale that we've ever done. It is lethal, and it is going to send a message to the Russians, and they're not going to be happy about it.
As expected, the decision angered Moscow, officials calling the policy a dead end, which will only lead to more violence. Earlier this month, President Trump's national security advisor hinted changes were coming to the White House's handling of Russian aggression.
And what we're continuing to do is strengthen Ukrainian defensive capabilities.
Ending the arms embargo comes at a time when the White House is pushing back on claims President Trump has been too soft on Russia. Today, Ukraine's security service arrested an aide to the prime minister for being a Russian spy. More evidence things are heating up in Eastern Europe. Bret.
Lucas Thomason at the Pentagon tonight. Lucas, thank you. It appears Cuban leader Raul Castro will stick around a little longer than expected. Cuba's National Assembly has extended its term by 2 months. Castro had said he would leave in February. Now it appears the government will stand until April. Officials say damage from Hurricane Irma forced the delay of Cuba's political cycle. Separatist political parties in the Spanish region of Catalonia are claiming victory in today's regional election there. The races pit pro-independence candidates, some of whom are fugitives or are in jail, against those who want to remain a part of Spain. Catalonia's declaration of independence in October prompted the Spanish government to fire regional officials and dissolve the parliament. Back here in the U.S., an American man is facing serious consequences tonight over the possession of illegal drugs on the Indonesian island of Bali. In the U.S., Christian Beasley is allowed to use medical marijuana. There, he's not. Here's national correspondent William Lajeunesse.
I have medical report from my doctors here and in America of why I use ganja.
32-year-old Christian Beasley is among the latest Americans in deep trouble abroad. His offense, possessing a baggie of marijuana.
I have a license to use ganja for medical reasons, but they want to give me 4 years or more.
Medical marijuana is legal in 29 states, recreational pot in 8 states, but not Indonesia, a predominantly Muslim country where marijuana is a Class 1 drug, no different than heroin.
Why does he have the hood on? Is it because he's been beat up? We don't know.
Hank Giesecke is Christian's father.
He's been kind of in and out of therapy most of his life. Sadly, when he was 4, he was kidnapped, and he was gone for a year and a half.
After 5 months in Bali's notorious Kerbokan prison, the California native escaped after being threatened by a prison gang.
The reason behind his escape was he felt pressured in prison and threats from other convicts.
Beasley faces 4 years to life for possession alone, or death as a trafficker, since police caught him with 5.7 grams. 0.7 too much.
Your heart just breaks for your son is there. Your son is there. My concern is, would they just take him out and shoot him?
The State Department said it does not get involved in domestic judicial affairs. As for those 3 UCLA basketball players caught stealing on camera in China, well, that required White House intervention. Bret?
We'll follow this one. William, thank you. Up next, the panel on efforts to stop the looming government shutdown and the end-of-year legislative push. We'll analyze it all. First, beyond our borders tonight, as Defense Secretary Jim Mattis makes a surprise visit to the U.S. base at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. He's the first Pentagon chief to go to Gitmo since 2002. Mattis says he's there to bring Christmas greetings to U.S. troops. Australian police say there's no evidence of a terrorism link to a car ramming pedestrians in Melbourne. 19 people were hurt. Authorities say the driver was an Australian citizen of Afghan descent who has a known history of drug use and mental health issues. And Pope Francis once again used his Christmas greeting to dress down colleagues at the Vatican. He denounced what he called the cancer of cliques and how bureaucrats can become corrupted by ambition and vanity. The Pope has a tradition of giving Vatican workers a tough love Christmas greeting. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back. This is a Fox News alert. You're looking live at the Senate floor there. This is the final vote coming up in the Senate on a stopgap government funding bill. As we mentioned, the House passed that measure earlier today. The Senate first had a procedural vote just moments ago. Now we're waiting on this final vote. Spending $81 billion on disaster relief, the senators decided they are going to wait until after the first of the year to deal with that. So now you're talking about the government funding. This is the shutdown vote everybody's waited for. They have to get to 60 votes in order to get it through. The House, as we mentioned earlier today, did its job on that front.
Every time we get to the end of a year, we think, I've just got to get it done. I've got to get it done.
The one thing that they're supposed to do is to keep this government running, to keep the lights on.
Look, we have maintained our position all along is we want a clean bill, and that's what we hope happens, and we hope it happens soon.
The hard right has such a pull on the Republican Party that any form of compromise that does things in the middle splits their party.
There'll be drama, there'll be chaos, there'll be yelling and screaming, and then we'll avert a shutdown.
News break. The Republicans control the Congress. They control the House, they control the Senate, and they have the signature in the White House. And they don't need us to keep government open.
On this vote, the yeas are 231, the nays are 188. The motion is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Again, the House passing it. The president weighing in today on Twitter, as he often does. House Democrats want to shut down for the holidays in order to distract from the very popular just passed tax cuts. House Republicans don't let this happen. Pass the CR today and keep our government open. They did just that. Let's bring in our panel from Steve Hayes, editor-in-chief for the Weekly Standard, A.B. Stoddard, associate editor at Real Clear Politics and host of No Labels Radio on Sirius XM, and Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist. If we have this vote, we're going to break into the panel and kind of get our tally as it goes along here. Steve, your thoughts on this end-of-year push, as we often see a fiscal cliff?
Yeah, well, it's been interesting to watch Republicans during this debate about the government shutdown because they've really stuck together, despite the fact that there have been some pretty serious internal differences among Republicans in the House on levels of defense spending, what have you. But they've stuck together, and every time Republicans stick together in an environment like this, it diminishes the leverage that Democrats have. This gets them through to the next one of these next month. I think Republicans will have much less leverage at that point because you're going to see a push, I think, by Republican hawks to increase the defense spending number overall. And Democrats are going to point to the Budget Control Act and say, if you want to increase defense spending, we're going to increase domestic spending.
AB.
Yeah, the January is looking like a real problem. Somehow they managed to put off not only dealing with these tough decisions on spending, but whatever deal they've made to get through this deadline involved dealing with disaster relief later and dealing most importantly with immigration, which is a really contentious issue. A lot of people have been assured that this is going to be, that there are a bipartisan coalition at work on this right now, and this is going to be dealt with in January. I think that's where you're going to see a lot of threats from proponents of fixing some kind of legalization for the Dreamers before that January 19th deadline for the next spending bill. That comes before the State of the Union address. It could be a very tough time for Republicans.
You know, on the spending for the disaster relief, one key figure is Puerto Rico Governor Rosello, and he was up on the Hill waiting for this to see if it was going to happen. Again, what they said, the Senate is punting till January. He says that's okay. We're expecting a better bill, meaning probably more money. Puerto Rico and other disasters rolled in there. Molly, it does look like January is going to be quite something.
Right. And one of the things that's interesting about a shutdown is that Republicans have previously shut down over concerns about the budget or Obamacare or other things that they thought were really serious. They believe they took a political hit for that, so they're not inclined to shut down the government. Democrats, being the party of government, are not inclined to shut down the government, even though they had claimed that they might do it over legalization or amnesty for people who had come here illegally. So there's not really much of a caucus on the Hill for people who want fiscal restraint. You know, one of the largest complaints about this tax bill, it's very good for corporations, it's very good for jumpstarting the economy, but is it enough to offset some of these spending problems we have? But there aren't people fighting for that, except for maybe Rand Paul, who said that if he doesn't want to see people busting through spending caps, and he pointed out that busting through spending caps has increased our deficit by $6 trillion, which is something that Congress has done 29 times. It just doesn't seem like there's much of a desire to pull in spending, and unfortunately I'm not sure if there's much public desire for that either.
It's such a turnabout from where we were two election cycles ago, when a lot of the campaigning happened in front of the national debt clock. Steve, you had an interview with the House Speaker, Paul Ryan, in which, to the Weekly Standard, at which, at the end of the day, he says, we've got to go after the root cause: healthcare, inflation, and entitlements. Welfare reform is going to be our next lift. We're never going to give up on entitlement reform and the things we need to do to get the debt under control. With one more reconciliation, I think we have a pretty good shot at getting some of these things done. But the Senate Majority Leader telling Axios today, I think the Democrats are not going to be interested in entitlement reform, so I would not expect to see that on the agenda. That's a bit of a different message from two sides of the Capitol.
Yeah, it was pretty extraordinary differences. I mean, Paul Ryan has made no secret going into my interview that he wanted to address welfare reform, that he was always going to be eager to return to entitlement reform, that he wanted to get back even to health care reform. And Mitch McConnell came out today and I think sort of dropped a nuke on Paul Ryan's plans. Ryan said these are the top priorities of his 2018 agenda. Mitch McConnell, in effect, said, not going to do that. That's not on my agenda at all. And he went even further. He said he wants to work, this is Mitch McConnell, said he wants to work with Democrats on an infrastructure bill. We've heard the president talk about $1 trillion infrastructure bill. There's not much enthusiasm, I can tell you, in House conservatives for a big infrastructure bill, particularly one that's defended in sort of Keynesian terms that Donald Trump has been defending. I think Molly's right about spending restraint, but of course the real spending restraint, the only spending restraint that really matters in the long term is entitlements. And without entitlement reform, that debt is going to continue to grow exponentially.
And AB, there's another side to this, and that is the Obamacare question. Again, the Senate Majority Leader is saying today that there's not going to be an immediate effort for another repeal and replace. Lindsey Graham saying, you bet, we're going back at it, because without the mandate, Obamacare is going to take some hits pretty quickly.
This is really a risk that they took, repealing the mandate, because that's what gets more people who are healthier into these marketplaces and makes them more and keeps them more competitive. The people in the pool are going to be sicker and older. The cost for the coverage is going to be more expensive. And so you heard President Trump this week say, we're going to replace it later with something that's going to be much better. This is the last thing that they want to do, to go back to the drawing board on Obamacare. It's why the Speaker tried to sort of put it off, but it's going to become politically perilous for them if come the middle of the spring or summer, inching towards that midterm election, maybe we're not at magical 6% economic growth as a result of the tax cut bill, and the public is really soured on what's happened to the Obamacare exchanges, begging Congress to do something about it. That's really a political risk going into those elections.
All right, last word, Molly.
Well, getting rid of the individual mandate was important because it was a horrible assault on people's liberty and it was a regressive tax on the poor. But AB is right. The regulations that accompany Obamacare are what caused so much trouble for the efficiency and the cost of that program. And Congress did not handle that this year, and it is something that they need to deal with. So get ready.
Yeah, we'll see. A lot on the table in January. Should be packed. Next up, the U.S. talks tough at the United Nations ahead of a lopsided vote. So now what?